Hello folks, this is my take on Fred Nachbaur's lovely little MiniBlok amplifier. Now, the way I did it, much more expensive components. Fred envisaged sort of a dirt cheap SET, and here is a schematic. And I chose this one because the way Fred laid it out was just absolutely fantastic for a beginner like me. Now, because I live in Australia, of course I needed a 240 volt supply, and the original schematic from Fred was naturally a US 120 volt supply, but what he did was he actually made a 240 volt supply pictorial available, so all I had to do was cut and paste, literally cut and paste with scissors and sellotape, not cut and paste on a computer. So I ended up with this one. Now, it's really self-explanatory, even for someone like me who's never made anything like this in my life. The only real difference I made was R1 here, Fred stipulated 100 ohm 1 watt resistor, but I decided in my ignorance to put in a one of these irrigators, whatever they're called. But it turns out the value is a little bit low, and as a consequence of that, on the B plus supply, instead of 215 volts, I get something like 230, but it still works, and yeah, it's no problem at all. As you can probably see from this one, it's got 3 transformers. One of them is the output, which is that one, and 2 transformers are the power supply transformers. One inverted compared with the other, so that you can get your heater supply, and then some other voodoo goes on in here. I've had it explained to me, but I don't quite know what it means. But anyway, you don't need to know what it all means. You just need to be able to follow a plan, just the mechanical layout. And this is what I did with this one. It's all fairly straightforward. The other change I made was well, C7 coupling capacitor, 0.15 microfarads, 250 volts. I originally put an orange drop in there, and then changed it for, as you can see, this is a Russian paper in oil. Whether it's any better or worse than the orange drop, I've really no idea. The amp works fine, it really does. Straightforward to put together, no real problems. I've followed the mechanical layout logically rather than any accepted method, and you end up with, I'm talking to myself, that's my wife, thinks I've gone by me. You end up with 1 watt 1 watt from this 13 EM7, which is a dissimilar dual triode tube, originally designed for TVs, vertical hold I think, or something, and as a consequence of that, as Fred mentions, it gets overlooked by audiophile buffs, but as he says, the requirement for this valve to be linear, which is just as important in TV as it is in audio. So these things are available, they're pretty cheap, there's plenty of them around, and it's a little beauty. It's supposed to be a 13 EM7 General Electric, but it's not. It's actually a 15 EA7, which is mechanically and electrically identical, so it's no drama. Yeah, what else? Sadly, Freddie's no longer with us. He died several years ago from cancer, but he left a legacy of this lovely little single-ended triode El Cheapo MiniBlok amp, and several others too. He does a push-pull, which I've looked at and can't get to grips, so that's too complex for me. So I went for the single-ended triode rather than the push-pull. As I said, really straightforward design. He recommended a star earth, and I didn't quite sort of follow that. I used a piece of brass rod from, I don't know, pin 3 I think, to earth, and then just soldered all my earths onto that. So it's sort of a pseudo star earth. Seems to work all right. The only thing is, when you fire up the amps, I get a little bit of a hum from both speakers, and that dies out within about 10 seconds. And from then on, you can't hear it. And I suspect it might be because the signal wire here goes pretty close to other wires, which I tried to avoid this, and I might look at rerouting this signal wire. Maybe not. I'm quite happy as it is. In my case, I potted the transformers. I used Hammond transformers for the power transformers, and I got an Australian guy who was making output transformers for a single-ended. I got him to wind me a couple just suitable for this requirement. And yeah, they sound very nice. Of course, the cost spirals. The cans themselves came from China, as most things do. I potted them. The casing, that's Chinese as well. And going back to 1 watt, you might think, the bloody hell good is 1 watt? Well, you'd be surprised. In my particular application, I'm using a pair of Fostex tower speakers. One driver does everything. Not particularly efficient, about 89–90% I think, 90 dB, I'm sorry. Something like that, might be a little bit more. And this is my main system, and I can turn it up to quite high levels, and no problem at all. So 1 watt with efficient speakers is absolutely satisfactory for a domestic environment, providing your room's not too big, and provided that the efficiency of your speakers is at least 90. You get it to 100 dB, for instance, like the old ones used to be, Klipschorns, etc. in the old days, 1,000 years ago. Around about 98–100 dB, you could run that to ear bleeding levels for about half a watt, maybe even a quarter. So you don't need this huge amplifiers chucking out thousands of watts to get some musical enjoyment, and especially since it's a triode, one of the most linear devices ever made. It's single-ended. And what else was I going to say about it? Something stupid. Yeah, can't think what I was going to say. But anyway, 1 watt, more than enough. I mentioned that these are 15 ES7s, but they're made in the US, and that is for me, it's very reassuring. I know they're going to be good. This little thing's great. Look, build one. If you like the idea of single-ended triode on the cheap, and this is your first dip into building a tube amp, build this one. You won't regret it. I've never built one of these things in my life, and I was really scared of the high voltages, but this one is not really that high. You're still going to be careful, of course. And when I was doing my tests, I got a tickle a couple of times, but that's just me being stupid. I was probably, instead of one hand in my pocket like I'm supposed to have, I was probably picking my nose at the same time and caused a short circuit. But anyway, yeah, all the figures that Fred gives, he gives a very reassuringly easy explanation of how to put the thing together and how to fault find, and that was what persuaded me. It's absolutely magic. So yeah, do it. Just do one. You don't have to go to the expense that I did, but I wanted something that sort of looked pretty well finished. And the pair of these together, well, I think look quite nice. Nothing else I can tell you about the guts. That was a problem with Fred's iteration. It was in a very small container, and I thought there's no way I can lay out all the wires and get them. And you don't want them talking to each other. It's very difficult not to do that. Both amps, when I built them, they both worked the first time, and to me they sound very nice. I'll probably do a little video on how they sound, but critics would argue that what's the point of listening to an amplifier or a system on YouTube? There isn't. That's quite right. But other people will say, come on, let's have a listen. So I'll probably do it. Just a little bit of non-copyrighted something or other. And yeah, it's great, isn't it? Isn't it fantastic? It's called a spud amp. Reason being, it's a one tuber. There's only one tube. And a tuber, the correct posh name for a tuber, for a potato, is a tuber. So potato, spud, potato, tomatoes, whatever. So it's called a spud amp. It's got to be the simplest amplifier you could possibly make. So there you go. And there's my little mate, Groot. Okay. Cheers for now.